All right. Um, when it comes to animals, I love animals. First time I went up to Montana, it was because I wanted to get a job working with horses. That's something me and Alicia have in common. Well, me and a lot of people have in common. I'm just talking to my computer. Oh, okay. So, I've been covering some ships um, in some of my talks, like the USS Constitution. Uh, I haven't gone much into the HMS Victory, but it is one of my favorites. If I was to go steal stuff that I actually wanted, just, one of those, if you could go Robin Hood crap or whatever for whatever reason, I'd go pirate me some ships. I'd get the Constitution, I would get the HMS Unicorn, I would get the HMS Victory. There's several tall ships that are privately owned that I would go after as well. Um, I just really like the Age of Sail. I love those ships. Um, a lot of the reason that I have been talking about the military ships and those old wooden ships is because of pirates. Um, I explained how it is that the United States was actually based and founded off piracy in the Caribbean in the 1720s. Not all pirates are the same. That was a different breed. These were a whole bunch of sailors who were disgruntled with their governments and disgruntled with the God wills it idea of seamanship. Um, any of y'all who have studied the Crusades, you know that God wills it is a saying that was used on both sides. It is the way that it is because God wills it. They won the battle because God wills it. We will win the next battle because God wills it. That didn't end up being the case. Now, dogs been with us longer than horses. One lady was talking about how she has. I'm assuming that I want to say she said it was Captain Hercules or Admiral Hercules or General Hercules, and I assume that was the dog's name. Here in the United States, a name like that usually goes to a big muscular breed like a Rottweiler, uh, usually a Mastiff breed. Now, why are Mastiffs important? Every single Mastiff breed, it doesn't matter if you're looking at a Rottweiler, a Pit Bull, Cane Corsa, um, even a more, well, most of these breeds are pretty modern, actually. You might not think of the St. Bernard as a modern breed, but it really is in the grand scheme of things. Most dogs and most dog breeds are not what they were even 100 years ago. As we progress, there's different uh, genetic traits that we seek out in dogs. And a lot of these dogs, the breeds were originally intended for specific purposes. Um, and we don't use those dogs for those purposes anymore. We use them for primarily companionship. Um, the United States, when we very first built ourselves actual naval ships instead of blockade runners, um, basically during the Revolutionary War, we were operating as pirates. The United States sailors were pretty well operating as pirates. It wasn't this whole ship to ship, you know, thing where you've got two line ships and they're lining up next to each other and trading broadsides. No, we're talking a sloop with 8 guns versus a Rosie with up to 64 guns. So speed is a lot more important, and you just want to be able to outrange and outdistance your opponent. Um, but all Mastiff breeds come from the Mediterranean. All of them specifically come from Mediterranean and Black Sea pirate dogs. This is way back during the Greek days and older. These are old breeds. It's well over 2,000 years ago that the Mastiff breeds were basically the pirates would take their dogs with them everywhere. They probably didn't call themselves pirates. A lot of the Greek city-states engaged actually in piracy to make their wages and make their livings. A lot of the island nations, especially, and many kings, they did actually have kings. When we think of the Greeks, we like to think specifically of Athenian Greeks or specifically as Spartan Greeks. What we don't think about is that it's nothing at all like going to Colorado and you've got 30 different cities in Colorado and they're all, part of the state of Colorado, and everybody, you have a giant council that everybody makes decisions based off of, all of that stuff. It wasn't at all like that back during Greek times. All of the Greek city states had different ideas. I mean, this would be like Denver being a communist nation, like a communist actual nation of its own. Um, Whereas we think of the entire United States as a nation. But they might be communist there in Denver, but then in Boulder, they might be socialist. But then you go to Longmont, and this might be just a bunch of warmongers who are out to kill everybody. You might have the people up in Niwot going, yeah, we're all for having slaves, and they'll own a whole bunch of slaves. And then you might have Louisville going, hey, slavery is pretty screwed up, and we absolutely refuse. But then when you're attacked by someone like Persia, they all go, well, we speak the same language. That was a lot of the issues that Julius Caesar had when he started conquering the North. A lot of those people actually liked him. There was a language barrier, though. And that common language is what held what they called the Celts and the Picts at the time. He got the name the Germans, by the way. The Germanic people were bound by a common language, and that started at the Teutoburg Forest. There's the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, but really the Teutoburg Forest itself is where Germany and the Germanic tribes, according to Julius Caesar, began. And that's the barrier with the Celtic and the Pict tribes, and then it becomes Germany after that. Throughout history, humankind has been extremely dependent on dogs, far more so than horses. In many cases and many civilizations and cultures, the only tool that was used for hunting was a dog. They didn't use bows or arrows. When it comes to the history of dogs in warfare, the Britons used war dogs. They used dogs that are similar. Not sure if you've ever heard of a dire wolf. A lot of people say that they're a myth, but the British had very, very large wolves, which you might not imagine to be the case. But let's imagine that you live somewhere and you have free trade, which we don't think of today. We don't think of the extensive trade routes that were established literally thousands of years ago. We like to think that all of those people back then were living like they were in the Dark Ages, where you're not allowed to leave your specific area of birth. You are born the property of a lord or a lady. Um, you owed them servitude. You owed them to run the land, and during the campaigning season, you owed it to your lords and ladies to know how to use a bow. And you might get to join the army and go fight the French or something screwy like that. But we have evidence in Europe and Asia that suggests the tin trade with Britain, uh, the Bronze Age, as some of us are aware, it started about 1,000 years earlier in China than it did across parts of Europe. There are parts of Europe that are 11, 1,200 years, you know, difference between Eastern China and Europe. That's for the beginning of the Bronze Age. Now, that tin at the beginning of the Bronze Age, the Britons were already trading with China roundabout. They also had traded extensively in Great Britain with blue glass beads that come from regions of France and Germany. And the Chinese also traded those items. Um, Now, I say Chinese and Britons and French and Germany because those are the modern names to regions of the world. Not so much because that's the country that it was back then, because they decided they weren't. The borders were different, the languages were different, the people were different. You know, through years and years of conquering, you end up with a lot of different genetic lineages from a lot of different places, and they are all over the world. I mean, you go to China, you're not going to find anyone who's 100% Chinese. Same thing in Germany with Germans. And you're definitely not going to find anybody in America who's 100% American. Native Americans, their lineages can be traced. Most of our lineages can be traced back to Baghdad. And that ought to know. Now, why are the dogs so important through all of this? I mean, we know that the Italians used war dogs. We're talking about unit groupings of war dogs. We know that um, not like today where we have like bomb sniffing dogs and things like that. But what was the important thing about these dogs? Well, these dogs would protect you. If there was something screwed up going on, your dog would sniff it out pretty close to immediately. Plus, mastiffs are big, thick breeds. So when people would see those, they'd see that it's a big dog, and they, well, it got into them, and yeah, you don't want to do anything after that. Go ahead and take my cargo. But the trade with the pirates in the Caribbean versus the Barbary Corsairs. In the Caribbean, they didn't really have slavery aboard ship, except as a punishment. And slavery aboard a ship as a punishment wasn't what you might think today. I mean, first of all, you're not putting somebody in a cotton field, you're on board a ship. Um, Second of all, I mean, you don't have anywhere to go. You're on a ship or you're in the fucking water. So basically, what you're doing is you're working to pay the rest of your passage until they can dump you off at the next port. You're no longer welcome on the ship, but you're not going to ride for free. The Barbary Corsairs, they were all about the slave trade. One of their favorite things to do was to raid American ships and take a bunch of American sailors as slaves. At this same point in time, this is right after the Revolutionary War, we're also dealing with the British uh, checking American ships everywhere they go and taking the American sailors and pressing them into service. Pressing means being forced into service. on board a naval vessel of Lord Nelson's day. That's that war. Matter of fact, the HMS Victory, the reason that it was finished after sitting for years and years and years is because of the Revolutionary War. That's the reason that Horatio Nelson got that ship instead of it just sitting there doing nothing like it had been for about 50 years or so at the time. Yeah, an ancient wooden ship or an old wooden ship just sitting there for 50 years. We can't even imagine that today. Something like that even lasting for 50 years just sitting there. But it was the American Revolution that got the HMS Victory the start that it needed for the infamy at the Battle of Trafalgar. See, at the Battle of Trafalgar, Lord Horatio Nelson was strongly believed to be the victor long before the battle was ever fought. It was fought between the Spanish, the French, and the English. And the Spanish and French were on the same side. Lord Horatio Nelson and his ships, they had better cannons. They had a flintlock system instead of a matchlock, so they could fire on a roll. So your ship is tilting back and forth like this. And depending on the angle and the degree at which it fires, you might be pointing it up in the air or down at the water by the time a slow match fires. I mean, we're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 seconds before it fires. You might shoot right into the water. You might shoot straight up in the air almost. So with a flintlock, you can wait until you're starting to come down on the down roll. And as you start coming down, that's when you fire. And hopefully, it's kind of like leading a target. This is where you want it to hit it. You fire it about here, and by the time it gets to about here is when it leaves the barrel, so you hit it where you want to. On British ships of the day, you weren't allowed to have dogs unless you were either the captain or an admiral or possibly the sailmaster was allowed to have a dog. The master of sails was a captain's job is to tell people what to do in battle, to fight the battle strategy. The masters of each of these given traits on board a ship, their job is to do what the captain says to the maximum capacity. It's kind of like the captain on a model U.S. naval carrier. It's a nuclear vessel. That captain doesn't necessarily know shit about nuclear power. I mean, he probably has quite a bit of an understanding because he's a captain on a U.S. naval ship. But, you have to know your ship. However, if he calls down to the engine room because they're having issues and he tells that man down there who is a nuclear technician, that is specifically his job. Hey, I need you to get that engine fixed. It is that nuclear technician's job to fix it. But it is also that nuclear technician's job and training and understanding that is going to fix it. The captain couldn't go down there himself and fix it if he wanted to. So, you have each person who is your specialist. And with human cargo, a lot of those dogs were used for helping find human cargo, human beings that were stowaways, human beings that were hiding on a vessel when pirates would go on board and they would try to, over in Europe in the Mediterranean, like with the Barbary Corsairs in the 1700s, 1800s, the Mediterranean pirates back in the Roman and Greek times were pretty ruthless and cutthroat too, and the slave trade was absolutely booming. One thing that we don't think about when we consider the European slave trade at that point in time is that color didn't matter. Another thing that we don't consider is that they were in constant trade, going all the way back to the Bronze Age and earlier, with cloth, with there's been cloth in China that has been linked with Great Britain. There is coins in Japan that have been linked with uh, ancient Rome. I mean, there is, and they were found underneath a castle. Um, I want to say from the Edo period, which I'm probably incorrect, but they're Roman coins underneath the foundations of the castle, which means those coins were there before the castle was built. I'm trying to be well. Now, the thing with dogs is that one lady was talking about her dog Hercules, and when I saw that, it immediately made me think of a Mastiff, because Zeus and Hercules are very common names for Mastiff breeds. Um, for hound breeds, you get names like Yeller or um, Pluto, kind of like Pluto from Disney. Yeah, that's actually still a pretty common name, probably because of that. For a hound breed with floppy ears, yeah. Um, but when I got to thinking about also some of the other things that she had typed, it made me think she was either British or possibly Australian or from New Zealand. Although I think the way that she typed it was very British. But a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with today, the pirates are both an example to follow and an example not to. I mean, the pirates in the Caribbean during the 1720s were a very specific and select breed of people during a very key situation in human history. Um, this is when the poor people, after killing each other over three rich people who are all related to each other, and all of these poor people are crammed into these decks. You've got, in a lot of these cases, you have 6 hammocks that are strung above your cannon, and that's where you live. You live above your cannon. Your feet are almost touching the head of the next person over. You've got a stick that's a specific distance wide, and if your stick is any wider than that, then they're going to flog you on deck in front of God and everybody with a cat of nine tails for stealing part of another man's space. We've got dogs for a reason, but dogs also, if you've got a dog that's assigned to you in the military or as a police officer or anything of that nature, anything that dog sees as a threat to you, it's going to do something about, which means if you've got a captain who is going to have you flogged, your dog might try to eat the captain. And we know what's going to happen if the dog tries to eat the captain. They're going to put the dog down. They might put you down. But to this day, dogs are an important part of humanity. Dogs are probably the most important part of humanity because dogs are made of love. That is what they are. If they're mad or angry or growling for whatever purpose, there is a purpose. If, let's say, you are afraid of black people, dogs aren't prejudiced and they're not racist. If you're afraid of black people and you don't want to admit it, your dog would give it away because your dog is going to start growling at all black people. Now, if there happens to be a black person that you don't feel that anxiety towards for whatever reason, you'll notice that your dog will shine on to that person. And I've seen that in multiple occasions where people say, dude, my dog's a fucking racist. I'm like, it's not that your dog's a racist, it's that you're afraid of black people. There's a big fucking difference. The dog doesn't go run and hide in the closet when black people come over. the dog doesn't do anything that would indicate the dog is afraid, like a black person is going to beat on them, like you're trying to tell me, oh, well, I think there was a black person abused him in the past. No, your dog's not giving any indicators of that. Your dog is giving indicators, being as your dog is getting between you and that person. That dog is giving indications that you are afraid of that person, and that dog is trying to protect you because you are afraid for whatever reason. You are that dog's family, and you obviously know something that that dog doesn't because you are the protector. You are the one who knows where the food is, gets the food, brings the food, brings the water, does all of these magical, wonderful things that a dog can't do for itself. And don't get me wrong, a dog can go get its food, but we have opposable thumbs. We can do lots of magic shit like open doors, and dogs are just in awe of this. Like when you go to open a door, you see how excited dogs are. They're like, oh my God, the magic thing is going to open the other magic thing and we're going to go potty. But when they're growling at you, there's a reason. When they're growling at somebody else, there's a reason. When they're doing something that you might consider naughty, they may not know that it's naughty because you have to teach them that. Dogs are real easy to teach too. Like they love when you start off training them with love, with positive attention, scratching them under the jowls, top of the ears. The jowls right here, that means I love you. And then you scratch them right in between where their tailbone and their hip are. Scratch right there vigorously. Oh, their back half starts doing this, and then it drops. But with a dog, it's important for you to understand a dog's communication. A dog can actually give you indication of whether or not the person that they are with is necessarily a positive person or somebody that you want to be around. I know a lot of people um, puppy love. They see somebody with a dog and they're like, oh my God, that person has a dog, so they must be a good person. Just so you know, I know a lot of dudes who own dogs because pardon my French, and I do apologize, but it pulls pussy. And that's what I say. A lot of these guys don't have your best interest at heart. What they have is, all right, well, girls or chicks dig puppies, you know, and that's kind of the whole thing. They're not women, they're chicks. And that kind of mentality, those people with those dogs, they have specific mannerisms they have, and their dog has specific mannerisms that it has. A lot of those people, if they're abusers, you can tell with their dog when their dog startles extremely easily, especially when the person that they're with moves. That's an indicator that that person is a physical abuser. That's something that's important to pay attention to. Um, Dogs love us and want us to be happy, and they will do pretty much whatever we tell them to because of it. If your dog loves you and your arch nemesis dog loves him, and you want your dogs to fight the war instead, they'll fight to the death. Your dogs will fight to the death for you in most cases. In the few cases that they won't, that's not your dog. You never had any business with a dog. You probably don't have any business around other human beings in that particular scenario. You're probably a sociopath with rage issues, and I feel real bad for you, and I feel even worse for anybody that you have to encounter. When it comes to Mastiff breeds, um, they're actually a lot more loyal and a lot less likely to bite you than a hound breed, believe it or not. Um, a hound breed, you can tell them like a greyhound's real skinny, right? They don't get real well filled out. Then you got like the dogs from where the red ferns grow. And I mean, basically, you look at any of those kind of dogs, all the way down to a beagle. A beagle is kind of a cross. It's a weird cross between a little bit of mastiff and a little bit of. I wonder if they're bred with corgis or if it's the other way around, because they look like they have similar body designs. Um, when you get a Dachshund Beagle cross, a lot of them look very much like a corgi, just different ears. Um, Today, a lot of people need companionship, and we're getting to a point in human society where everybody's saying, "Man, you just got to look out for yourself. You just got to look out for yourself." And then there's the you got to look out for you and your own. Well, if I don't have any, me and my, you know, I need a dog. I need a place where I can have a dog. This thing right here, not exactly a place where I can have a dog. It's just a trailer, and the amount of money that they want from me to have a dog at the low income up there, I can't come up with it. But not now anyway. It's going to take a few months just to get all of the stuff that I need together to get my court stuff going. I mean, I have to budget a little bit at a time to spend on things like that printer that I bought last time. That was pretty important for me to have that. With a lot of the stuff that I have, it's a good thing I do have a printer. And I do realize, oh, all right, word of advice: if you're smoking tobacco out of a pipe, don't hit it like it's pot. That's fucking gross, and you will just throat for hours. You'll probably have to cough up some nasty phlegm too. I'm addicted to tobacco. I don't recommend smoking tobacco. I take the cigarettes here, and you notice this one's empty. That's what I put in my pipe. That's why they're all empty. Um, there's a couple of them up here somewhere that aren't, but I can't find them. There's one. Um, I just wanted to say that because I do know that I smoke out of a pipe, and I do know that it's made out of aluminum. And no, it's not crack. Here, I'll tap off the stuff on off, and you can see that it's brown underneath. It's not green. It's not white. It's tobacco. And part of the reason for showing that is I get a lot of people since Natalie died. Well, for about a year before Natalie died, people assuming and accusing me of being a crackhead or a meth head or fucking crazy stuff like that. I'm like, no, that's not even close to the case. I don't do any of that shit. And lots of the people that see it's brown. A lot of the people that have known me for years that I've had conversations with that are on my YouTube here. They're addicts who have admitted, yeah, Sean doesn't do drugs. I don't do drugs. The closest I do, well, I smoke tobacco, and upon occasion I smoke marijuana. And, that was one of the big major trades back in the day. We don't like to talk about that, but it wasn't just for marijuana at the time. But most of the ropes were on these ships. They're hemp ropes. The Chinese made both hemp ropes and bamboo ropes. And bamboo ropes are actually very, very nice. Um, they were sought after by the Portuguese for a lot of years. They're really good ropes. Um, but all in all, a lot of the trade that we have had here in the United States is because of the ocean. I mean, we have safe ports or relatively safe ports. We have both deep draft ports and we also have shallow draft ports. So we can build different types of ships and keep ourselves protected from different types of navies. Um, and then we had the fact that most of the people on the East Coast, they subsidize a lot of their income by getting stuff for the Navy. They used to have people who would make tree scars. They'd go out and they'd scrape a lot of the pine trees and stuff like that that are, pardon me, over on the East Coast. And then they would put a bucket underneath, and the bucket would fill up with the pine sap, and you could sell that pine sap. You could get turpentine out of that pine sap. You could get resin out of it or rosin. You know, like for a bow, yeah, you can do that with sap. You would also get a lot of the ropes and stuff are made by local people. At the time, there was a lot of hemp that grew naturally. I'm not sure if it was something that was imported by Europeans and just started growing wildfire like weeds or what. But what I do know is that a lot of the stuff that we're doing in society today is basically making it illegal to take care of yourself. Most people don't even know how to take care of themselves. Most people, if they had to have the carpentry skills to build something, simply don't have it without electricity and modern tools and somebody else showing them how to do everything. Once you've watched other people do it enough and gotten to help out enough, you have the confidence in it to do it yourself. And that's something that we lack today as a society is that confidence. There's a lot of people who have it in their heads that it's always going to be computers from here on out, and they don't need to learn anything about manual labor or wiping their own ass. Um, when I say wiping your own ass, I mean there's. Let me give you an example. Let's say the Amish come over here. They chop down some of their own trees on their own land. They make themselves a timber frame, and then they put an exterior on that timber frame, and they've built it all with materials that are right there and handy. Then you do it the lumberyard way. And that particular way, we're creating a lot of jobs. We really are. We're starting off with the lumber people in Washington State through Weyerhaeuser, and they're cutting down a whole bunch of trees in Washington State. And you've got to go through the processing and the milling plant, and then from the processing the milling plant, which involved a couple of truckers to get it there and get it taken care of. Now you've got to put it on another truck and you've got to take it to wherever it needs to go. It's got to be chemically treated. It's got to be a whole bunch of stuff before it gets there. And you're paying for the gas, you're paying for wear and tear on the vehicle, and you're paying mileage for the driver. So then it gets to where it is that it's going, and it sits there for a while, and it gets warped or it doesn't dry properly, it doesn't cure properly. It's basically rushed out because we're constantly using this crap, and it is complete and total trash. Um, Mostly because of the price, and you think you're getting a good deal when you go down and you buy, two or three different pieces. But then when you go consider what it would take for you to do it yourself, you really are spending about 20 times more in materials than you would be investing in both time and in tools to harvest those materials yourself. Um, a lot of the things, like with ancient castles and stuff, now this has all got to do with dogs for a reason. Ancient castles, like the castles in Italy, were protected by the cane corsa. Is similar to an American Rottweiler, I guess, sort of. Um, I'm sorry, I just got really sick all of a sudden.